Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
We're back with another episode here today as we're doing a continuation from last week. And last week, if you haven't listened to the last episode, you're going to want to go back to really get context for the power of what we're going to get into in this episode. Last episode, we talked to my good friend Jeremy, and Jeremy shared about his childhood of abuse, his secrets that he carried inside of his heart, and the pain of those secrets, and how they actually started affecting the behavior in his life, the destruction that began to happen because of it, and his pain of running from it. And so many of us are running from the pain inside, the secrets inside, and we're really about stopping in these episodes and addressing these secrets that we run from. And because inside of those secrets, inside of facing those secrets, is a freedom we've always been longing for. So thanks again for joining us here today, Jeremy.
So glad to be here.
It's so fun to see you in person again. And just to follow up again, we've been in each other's lives for about a little over a year now.
Yep.
And you were here over just over a year ago, almost just over a year
and
ago.
a week ago.
Yeah. It's crazy that you happen to come down.
I
It
know,
just so
right?
happens that Jeremy said, "Oh, I'm coming to town." And over a year ago, we met at a conference where I was speaking at, and he came up, and we have a wild story, and we're going to get into our history, our story that's going to kind of put a nice bow tie on this whole situation when we're done at the end here. But last week we ended off with you at basically kind of an alcoholic drunken stupor where you'd gotten I don't know what number of DUI was that at.
I was at 3 DUIs at this point, and living in isolation, which was
on a
not,
ranch in Wyoming,
in the middle of nowhere.
Recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and just like drinking a handle of whiskey every night.
Wow.
By myself.
Wow.
Yeah, and like again in the world's eyes, I mean, I had the dream job, I had a lot of clout and around town, and was becoming a decent in my craft with roping and horse training, and but inside, man, I was dying. I couldn't handle the pain, and I didn't know where to go with it. Couldn't talk about it yet. So yeah, I just kept dumping whiskey down. So
what started to happen in that process?
I had to get out of that place, so I found another job that I had passed up a year or two before that.
Wow.
I happened to call the guy, and it was in Arizona, and I'm like, "Hey, you probably found somebody." He's like, "I just ran that guy off. How fast can you get here?" So it's like a safe landing spot.
Wow.
And it was in a much less rural area and a fresh start. And in the meantime, in that, I also found out I had a daughter.
Whoa. Yeah. Really?
Yep. I was. It was a little bit before the Wyoming job I had, but I was laying on the couch with my girlfriend at the time, and I get a phone call. It was like,
so this is back in Wyoming before you got to Arizona that you get this phone call.
Yeah, actually, yeah. And I was in Arizona,
Okay.
but another time. I remember I moved a lot.
Yeah.
Not to confuse everyone, but I was in Arizona on the couch with my girlfriend watching a movie. Phone rings. "Hey, I don't know if you remember me. We met a few years ago, but you have a daughter."
Oh.
And
how old was your daughter at that point?
I want to say she was like a year old.
Wow.
It took some doing because all she knew, I flew to Montana for a wedding. And
so she'd been around with a couple. Got to say that again.
I got with my daughter's mom.
Oh,
at a bar.
I thought you were saying you got with this girl's mom, and then you're going to tell me you got with her too.
No.
Okay. So you got with this woman.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And all she knew was my first name. I flew out of town the next morning, and it took a while for her to track me down. But anyway, she told me that I had a daughter, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to call you back, right? Because
yes,
I'm in no position to. I can't even hardly take care of my dog at this point. So
how old were you at this point? Do you remember?
30.
Wow.
Probably 20. Yeah, somewhere in there.
Late 20s, early 30s. Okay.
Yeah, late 20s.
Okay.
So I, when it was time to go back to Wyoming for the summer, and a month or two later, I drove up there and went and had a paternity test, and sure enough, this beautiful little girl, Gabby, was my daughter, which created a lot of pain for me because I was like, there's no way I can be a dad to this little girl.
Yeah, I can't even, like you said, I can't even function day to day barely.
Yeah, and so that played that secret, right, that you're talking about, of like having to tell my family and feeling like, oh, well, he blew it, which they, of course, embraced her and my mom especially. And so that was a very challenging thing to navigate. Like, okay, I'm going to go get my daughter for the weekend. How am I going to stay sober long enough to spend some time with her? Because the pain of all the things at that time I was accustomed to. And then, fortunately, her and my now wife have hit it off, and my mom and my sister are very close. They're very close with her. So that relationship's still unfolding for her and I. That's a journey that we're on, and I look forward to kind of figuring that out. But that was a very eye-opening realization of like, okay, you can't run from this.
Yeah, this thing is right in your face.
Yeah.
You cannot escape it.
She needs you. And I was unavailable.
Yeah.
And that brought a lot of pain and shame and
wow
of not being there for her, and she lived a long ways away, and I would justify it by, well, she lives a long ways away. So I would imagine, is there still some pain between the two of you, or at least that you're trying to reconcile? Yeah, for sure. We've had some good talks, and I think that's, as I'm getting more tools from you guys.
Oh, that's kind of you.
That's definitely on the horizon. I realized last week that, speaking of the LFA course, like, I have been trying so hard for the last 10 years to either save my marriage, stay out of prison, or not hurt myself. That there's a lot of things that are coming up that are like, oh, I need to work on that also. I just haven't, it's been survival mode.
Yeah.
Right. So it's with my daughter, that's something that's like, okay, first I got to figure out how not to hate women before I can enter into, once I recognize that I had this issue.
Yeah.
I better first like figure out my marriage and then, and my relationship with my mom, but that's definitely
a high priority.
One of the next big things I need to reconcile
is how to reconcile that.
Yeah. And just how to show up for her.
Yeah. That's a big deal. And I love that your admittance of that. Like I'm still on the journey, right? You're still on the journey of figuring out how to do that. You didn't arrive at some place where you have all the answers. A lot of people like feel like, if I've gone this long making messes, what's the point? But there's a change. It's like even your dad, let me back up. Maya Angelou once said to Oprah, she was talking to Oprah, and she talked about how her mom was a terrible mother for a little girl as a daughter. So Maya Angelou's mother was a terrible mother to a little kid, but she was an amazing mother to an adult. And what you kind of described is, my dad wasn't that great in some aspects to me as a kid, but he was a great dad to an adult and to our family. He was great at being a grandpa. He was great at whatever area. And I think that's the point, is that and I talked about this to another close friend of mine. I said, yeah, you totally failed your kids as a dad when they were little, but you can now turn it all around years later and be a great dad to them as adults. And that was an aha moment for him. And again, it's never too late to begin to become a great father, a great mother, a great husband. You may not have been able to do it in the beginning, but you can become great now. And the fact that's good. I like the way you put that, because it gives me hope, right? Yeah. And the fact that my daughter wants a relationship from me, we've had some good talks, and I told her, hey, look, you can call me at 2 a.m. anytime you want. You have permission, and tell me what a piece of crap dad I was and didn't show up for you, because I don't want her to
have any of that resentment of like, oh, you think because it's awkward, right? It's hard. I got 3 other children now.
Yeah.
And she gets to see me with that dynamic. Like,
and she gets to see you show up for them,
right,
and not for her. And
yeah. So it's a journey that is going to be painful for me, but it's worth it. Like you said, that's real good. I find hope in that. Like, I can show up for her.
Yeah.
When she, from here on,
yeah,
moving
you
forward
get to draw
too.
that line in the sand. Well, speaking of your other kids, and you talked about a marriage, can we dive into that? Do you feel like this is a good place to dive into that?
That kind of fast forwards us to, I leave Wyoming, get this job, and another dream job in Arizona, managing a ranch for a guy and being a horse trainer and putting on ropings and living the life. And but now I have access to people. So now it's back to being, it's game on, right? Because I have this amazing facility and I can have all night parties, and I have lots of, lots of things to do out there, and cows to rope and horses and lights and music. And I was making a lot of money, so I could afford lots of booze, and it was a party spot. And this horse trainer friend I got to know, when it would rain, they would come to I had a covered arena, and so they would come.
Oh, wow.
And he had this cute little assistant that would drive in his big dually truck with a trailer load of horses, and she's this little thing. And I'm like, we became friends. I was dating another girl, and we just naturally became friends. And I was like, man, there's something about Mary, right?
Something about Mary.
And we just hung out, and she knew who I was. I was that guy,
right.
And she was.
I know Jeremy.
Yeah,
everybody loves Jeremy.
She's pretty put together, and shows up for work on time, and grew up in a very stable home, and had her stuff together. And I was just like, man, she just had this quality that I knew I wanted in a woman, but a lot of it too was I felt like I don't deserve her. So I was like, kind of didn't know what to do, but I knew that I couldn't lose her. So we never even talked about marriage. I'm like, hey, you ever been to Wyoming? She's like, no. I'm like, let's go to the Tetons and I'll take you hiking. And I will give you a wedding, an engagement ring, and tell you I love you all at the same time for the first time. Like, never even told her I loved her before. I'm like,
wait,
here's a ring.
How long had you known her by the time you pop a ring in on her?
We'd been dating for not even a year or anything.
Okay.
Yeah, and I
hadn't even said I love you yet.
No,
you're like, here's a ring.
It was a little more thought out than that. I like took her to this beautiful lake, like up in the mountains of the Tetons, and I like get on a knee. She's sitting on a rock, and I'm like, hey, I just want you to know that I love you, and I'd like for you to, do you want to get married? And it was super exciting. And at that point, I was still just kind of fun party guy, but like I started going to church with her, so she was like, there's hope in this guy, She knew my history with like going to church, but I definitely was running from the Lord at that point, and living my wild, crazy life. And so, we're like, I'm 33, she's 4 years younger than me, but I'm like, why wait? We're like, we got engaged on 1st of July, and we're getting married in September.
Okay,
so it's super short, because we're like, so we get married in Wyoming, and before we do, she's like, I think you may have an issue with drinking. Like, I'm like, what? Defensive. Like, of course I don't. It's like, what are you talking about? She's like, well, you're going to have to quit drinking if we're going to get married and have kids. And
it's like one of those situations where I think your house is on fire and the house is blazing on fire. You're like, what? No. What
As you're standing there drinking coffee, like, what fire? I don't see a fire.
Totally.
So I'm like, well, sure, babe. Like, yeah, done. It's not a problem anyway. I'll quit. So then we get married and come back, and we're not married. I was shoeing horses and training horses, and I was starting to figure out how I could drink during the day.
Oh.
Right? So I'd go to Circle K and fill up my cup and buy a bottle of vodka and shoe horses all day. Very high functioning alcoholic. Yeah. I could go shoe 8 horses a day, come home. Sometimes she would be like, what's wrong with you? Another time she wouldn't even be able to tell, because I could time it right. So I was kind of coming down by the time I got home and just kind of stay at this level all day. And then one day, we're not married very long, like we get a phone call and get this incredible job opportunity in Idaho to go build this amazing horse facility. So we moved to Idaho, and we're making six figures, and like,
Wow.
I mean, like life's coming together, right?
Yeah.
And I'm hiding it, but then it's kind of like ease back into it. I'm like, oh, I'll have a bottle of wine with dinner, and I'll cook, and I'll saute some mushrooms with the wine, and drink a bottle on my way home from the grocery store, and then present this other bottle. And
Oh, wow. So really, really hidden a lot of secrets in that.
I'm really starting to get creative of how I can not be an alcoholic, but numb that pain. Right.
Yeah.
One time in particular, I went to a music festival up at the ski resort, right? And she'd stayed home because I believe she was early on in her pregnancy with our first son. And I come home, and she's waiting up, and I was hammered. And I remember we were in our living room, and she's like, "What's wrong with you? Why are you drinking? Why am I not enough?"
Right, because she's taking it all that it's about me.
Yeah. Why am I not showing up for you?
Yeah.
And I ran out of reasons. I didn't know what to say.
Was that building an intensity, that
It
conversation?
had been building
even?
for a while,
Yeah.
right? Like it was, and I just remember standing in our little 900 square foot first house. My pregnant wife, she's crying like, "Why can't you stop drinking?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And finally I just screamed at her. I'm like, "I've given more blowjobs than you have."
Wow. What did she do? Like, what happened?
She just like melted. Like,
Could you hear like a pin drop in the house?
yeah, because I've never even mentioned any history.
Any of it. She has no idea the abuse of your childhood.
No, none. But I didn't know how to have that conversation.
Yeah, it's terrifying. Right?
As a manly man and like cowboy guy and like life of the party guy, and
yeah,
like I did not know how to have that conversation. I did not know how to be vulnerable. I did not know that I could trust her,
right.
that she would have compassion for me. So it came out as anger, and I remember like slamming the door and peeling out and leaving.
Wow.
And going and getting even drunker.
Yeah.
We never talked about it again.
Wow, you didn't.
Because I couldn't. I just
she
was
didn't
like,
approach it. She's just like,
I don't. Yeah. What do you do?
Yeah.
You know, like that's a big drop on someone.
yeah,
For it to come out that way.
yeah.
So fast forward, I don't know how many months. I'm still like trying not to drink, but ultimately drinking. And we go to, we're pretty plugged in our church at this point and going to a Bible study. And it was back in the BlackBerry days, right? Like the first smartphones. And I'd just gotten a Facebook account like within a few months of that. And we're driving home from Bible school. Our son is now a baby in the back seat. Mary's driving. I'm pretty sure had been drinking that day because I did every day, but we're driving home and I get a notification on my little BlackBerry, and the guy that made me do all those horrible things to him sent me a Facebook friend request.
Wow.
And I had a full-on nervous breakdown.
Wow.
From what she tells me, I don't really remember it. I was just kind of humming and like swaying back and forth in the front seat.
Wow.
Pull into the garage of the house, and I stayed in the car doing that for 4 or 5 hours, 6 hours. She couldn't get me out of the car.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Total breakdown.
Just to see his face and his name.
Yeah.
Like I told her, I erupted months before that and said the thing, but then I quickly buried it, and I don't think that I ever thought about it again. And now I am looking at his face.
Yep.
And she tried to call my dad, couldn't get a hold of him. Finally got a hold of our pastor. It's like 2 or 3 in the morning at this point, and I just remember him like praying over me and like talking to me and like literally like, open the door, put your right foot out. You can do like literally like, and I was just like in a comatose, like humming, like and rocking back and forth.
Oh, that breaks my heart.
Yeah, it was crazy, right? And then
'cause
again,
I can even see the little boy inside of you that just snapped. The little boy who's terrified, who's all of a sudden reliving his reality. His reality of his past cannot escape him.
Yeah, it was. But again, we didn't talk about it. We just kind of,
Wow.
like,
Yeah.
I had so much fear and so much like, and she probably tried to be like, we need to talk about this.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I just remember that the next few years were just a haze of, I had this super high profile job in the community. We did a lot for the community and 4-H, and we had this big indoor heated arena. And so in the winter, everybody's come over, and I was drinking a bottle of vodka a day.
Oh my gosh.
I would get up and plow snow at 4 a.m. and start. I would get a bottle the night before.
Wow.
And I would start and I would stay in it all day. I could not function. I could not go one day. I started, we finally, I'm sleeping on the couch, like our marriage is in shambles, right? And the crazy thing is the whole time she's like, it's not even the drinking, just please don't lie to me. She would plead with me.
Right.
Please just don't lie to me about it. Like, we can get through the drinking thing. Just don't lie to me. I couldn't do it. I would just deny it.
And it feels so powerless for her because she just can't actually get to you.
No, it was nothing. Like, she thought, well, once we get married, it'll stop. Once we have a kid, surely. But I couldn't. I didn't have it in me. I didn't know. I didn't trust anybody in that. We went to marriage counseling a little bit, and it was awful, and I was defensive and went nowhere.
Right, your walls were up the whole time. It wasn't going to go anywhere.
And I remember, like, being on the couch, like, begging God, take this from me.
Wow.
Like, I don't want to do this. One time in particular, I'd been sober for a while, and like a couple of months, and things were looking good. I was sleeping in the bedroom again, and like, we were connecting, and like there was some hope there, and some circumstance happened, which is all it took. And I remember there was it was winter, there was a lot of snow where we lived, and I was parked in the back alley behind the liquor store, begging God, don't let me do this. What? Don't let me go. Don't let me go in there. I'm so close. Take this from me. I can't do this anymore. And I couldn't. I sat in my truck for an hour screaming at God, like, please don't let me go in there. Because I know once I do what it'll cost. It's going to cost me everything. And I went in there anyway. I could not. And after that, the shame was, well, you blew it yesterday. You might as well blow it today.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I just remember that's when the self-hatred really started. And what it was costing those around me.
Yeah.
Because when you're an addict, at the core of it, you're really selfish, right?
Yeah.
And that was the first time that I was aware of, like, yeah, this is really costing those around me too, Yeah. And the hopelessness of, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to go in there and buy another handle of vodka. Like, please take it from me. And I'm not. And he didn't take it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't very long after that, the 2008 real estate crashed, and this was a real estate development with an equestrian center, like in Louisville Golf Course. So he called up like a week before Christmas, the developer, and was like, I'm going to mothball the whole place. Like, we're shutting her down. And we lived in a house that we could only afford with that job, right?
Yeah.
And my wife's heart is just trashed at this point. And her people group, her safety is back in Arizona where we met, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I knew it. I'm like, if she could just get back to Arizona, it'll be over for us.
Yeah.
And sure enough, like, as soon as we lost that job, it was like, we can't afford this house. The house it's a real expensive area to live in, but so we lost everything. We lost our house. We lost my truck. Literally, my best friend had to come pick up our horse trailer with all of our horses and haul them to Arizona, and I drove the U-Haul. And crazily enough, the place we were living at when we got married, that job I had, that guy got a divorce, sold all the horses, all the things, and that place was open again out of the blue.
Oh.
We moved right back into the house we were living in when we got married.
Oh, wow.
The fun party place.
Yeah.
The same couch went in the same spot, same pictures went on the wall. Like, we moved right back in to where we lived, same church, all the things. And from there, though, my pride was so hurt, from losing that high-powered job and all the money and the truck and all the things. I was back to being a horseshoer and knocking around some colts to eke out barely a living. And the drinking picked up even a notch higher than it was. Like, I didn't even try to hide it really anymore. I didn't care.
Right. Total hopelessness.
Well, she got back to her people group. So she had her friends. She felt safe. Our old church, they embraced her. And immediately I'm the bad guy, right?
Right.
We'd go to marriage counseling. I almost got in a fist fight with my pastor. Like, it was bad.
Wow.
I was so defensive because I was hurting. And I didn't know how to say, look, I get it's my fault, but some stuff happened that I don't know what to do with it, and I can't stop this behavior.
Yep.
I didn't know how to ask for help right?
Yep.
So he advised that we get separated and not get divorced, but separate, and I just kept lying to her about drinking. And
Did you guys go into the separation?
Well, it started with me moving out to a closet that was kind of up by the arena, like it was an office where I had a desk. And I put my bedroll in there, and I started living in there. And as long as our son was awake, I could be in the house. But the second he went to bed, I had to be out.
Wow.
And then I was like, screw this. I can't take this pain of this rejection.
Right.
Because remember, I have a lifelong history with rejection.
Yep.
And now I'm getting it from my wife. And rightfully so. But nonetheless, I couldn't take it anymore. So I made a few phone calls. Got some work up in Wyoming, and I'm like, I'm out. Went to Wyoming.
So you left her, basically. Like, there was a separation there, but you took initiative to be like, all right, screw you. I'm not going to live in this rejection. I'm out.
And I need to work.
Right.
So I'm like, well, I can go to Wyoming and work for the summer, and it'll be good for us to get away from each other. Because I'm like, I couldn't talk to her without being defensive and like, what are you doing to our family?
Yeah.
And it was all my fault. But so I go to Wyoming sober, like 2 months sober, got invited to some party, couldn't do it, didn't make it, blah, blah, blah. Now I'm right back in the middle of it, but now it's even worse. Now I'm like not getting it. Now I'm not leaving the cabin I was living in.
Wow.
Broke like crazy. Again, one of my best friends, like, here's some horses, go sell them for some money, like, gave me some horses to go sell. So I sold them, I hauled them to Montana. I'm like, okay, this is perfect. I'll go drop these horses off. Then I'm going to go to Billings to see my daughter. And, I'm living my life. I drove all the way from Arizona to Wyoming, hammered, don't remember it. Woke up in a truck stop in Wyoming. I'm like, how did I get here?
Oh, wow.
Like, blackout drunk, made it all the way somehow. I was missing a mirror. I hit something. My passenger mirror was gone when I came to. Like,
oh, wow.
Who knows, another car or telephone pole or what, like. So anyway, I go drop the horses off and I get pulled over, get a DUI in Montana.
Oh my gosh.
And now I'm like, and at this point, Mary thinks I've been sober for a few months, right?
Right. Now this is your fourth DUI.
Fourth DUI. So I go to Billings, get a motel room, drink myself almost to death that night, get up the next morning with the pain that I cannot describe to you or anyone else of what that's going to cost me.
Right.
So I have my horse trailer. It's empty because I dropped off the horses. I'm headed back to Jackson to my cabin and was drinking all the way from there to there. It's like an 8-hour drive. And I hadn't eaten, and I'm still not doing well from the day before, and I get pulled over again.
No.
And this time in Wyoming, they don't let you out of jail till you see a judge. Thank goodness. It saved my life.
Really?
Yeah. At that point, it was, I was at a point where it wasn't worth it anymore. I thought about just driving off the road, so it didn't bring as much shame to my family as like doing it another way. But like, he was drinking, driving, he ran off the road. He didn't hurt anybody, but he killed himself. Like, that's the thoughts that were going through my head at that time. But yeah, going over Teton Pass, got pulled over. So now I've got 2 DUIs in 48 hours.
Whoa.
4 and 5.
The fact that you're not locked up forever.
To this day. Oh yeah. That's
DUIs.
Another episode in itself.
Totally.
How Jeremy is not in prison.
Yeah.
Another 2-parter.
Yeah, totally.
But so they kept me in jail till I see a judge, like for a day and a half. Nobody knows where I'm at. My truck's on the side of the pass, like with the trailer. But something happened that night in that jail cell that changed my life forever. I'm in the holding cell, like at the lowest point, the rock bottom part that everybody's has is a little different. I was there, and remember on the couch and in my truck begging God to take this from me.
Yeah.
My prayer changed to, wait, what kind of father am I going to be? And years later, let me go back. So that night, I asked the Lord, if you could take this from me, what kind of father could I be for my son? I know my marriage is over. I know the damage I've done. It was like the first time, like, there was some responsibility of me not, like, understanding what this was going to look like moving forward, but, like, I've done it this time.
Right. And almost even from selfish places to, like, I actually want to be able to be a dad. Is that kind of what happened for you?
Like, this is more than about me.
Yeah.
That selfishness of being an addict, of like, and Justin, I can only tell you that the prayer, that the conversation I had with God that day, I felt alcoholism like leave my body.
Wow.
Like I got
Only way
sober.
To describe it. It felt like something
I got
different
clear-minded.
lifted.
Yeah. It was gone. And in September, it'll be 10 years.
Wow.
And I'd never have found myself in front of a liquor store again. I've never in AA. I had to go a lot of AA in my life for a court ordered. Like they call them wet dreams, where you dream about being drunk or drinking. I've never had any of the symptoms. I've never had any withdrawals. I never had any of it. And about 3 years ago, I asked God one day, I was working, and I said, why then? Why that prayer? What was different about that? I didn't feel like it was any different than the times I begged you before. And he said it was your heart. It was your heart position of, it was a father asking a father about being a father for his son. But it was this beautiful thing, like it wasn't about me anymore.
Right.
And like, it was like, I don't want to be this kind of dad for him from this place forward, regardless of what happens to me for the rest of my life. I want to be able to show up and be a dad for him. And it was that compassion of a father asking a father about being a good father.
Yeah. And I would say that there was even a bigger, I would say that your earlier times in pain, when you're like, will you take this from me? There wasn't a full submission of your will on it.
No, it was because I wanted out of my circumstances.
Exactly. Because
I wanted my wife to make love to me. I wanted her I didn't want to sleep on the couch anymore.
I didn't want to be rejected anymore.
Yeah.
And when we talk about selfishness, we're not talking about like the idea that the father would want to bring healing to you in these places. Absolutely. He would want to bring healing to your heart, even outside of your own kid, because he wants to bring healing to his own son. But inside of yourself, you weren't asking from a place of, my will is actually here to be bent, because I believe that love, the foundation for love is will, and our ability to say yes or no to things. And there's a respect for that will, because if that will is violated, that actual will that's deep under the surface is violated, then it's not actual love. And at the end of the day, him going, hey, I'm just going to make this go away right now, when your will isn't actually this. Your will hasn't got to that yet, Jeremy. You just don't want to have to feel this pain in this moment. And that's not doing you any justice. You don't actually want this taken away. I'll be here when you're ready to actually hand this over to me.
Yep, that's exactly, I feel like, that transfer of like, and that's
where the miraculous happens, is that when our will bends to actually something higher.
Yeah, so my other best friend came and bailed me out of jail.
Wow.
And it was weird. I've never been so hopeful about one thing and hated myself more.
Right.
So I knew I was never drinking again. that was solid. That was just something in me knew I was never going to drink again. However, the damage I'd caused, I was going to have to pay the piper.
Yeah. And so you feel like it's irreparable, especially in your marriage, right?
My marriage was over. Yeah.
Right. And that, I know that how long were you separated with her?
Total after that,
yeah,
altogether, it was like 3.5 years.
And what happened? Did you guys get a divorce or?
No, so I got out of jail that day and went back to my cabin, and I was so sick of what I had done and the weight of like the legal ramifications of what I'd done.
Oh
right?
Yeah, the financial and
so
all kinds of stuff.
I get an attorney, and he looks up and he's like, "Oh yeah, you're going away for a long time, dude." So that kind of weighing of like, oh, I'm that dad. I'm going to be that guy, because I never considered myself that guy. Like when people said alcoholic, I'm like, oh, I'm glad that's not me. You know what I mean? Like,
totally.
What a bunch of losers those guys are.
Totally.
So it was the next 10 days, 2 weeks. I could not leave the county because I had to go blow at the sheriff's office at 5 o'clock in the morning because they considered me a flight risk. Were the darkest days of my life.
Wow.
It's such a weird paradigm, because I knew I would never drink again, but yet I had no hope.
Yeah.
Like the pain I'd caused my wife and the shame I'd brought to my family and the kind of dad that I was going to be, especially with looking at going to prison.
Yeah.
There was only one way out. And that ended up with me putting a gun in my mouth and fighting through that process of, am I going to be a worse dad, dead or alive?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which one?
Which I know a lot of people have battled that. I've had people in my office have those conversations where I don't know what's worse, if I have to be around or if they have to just deal with the fact that I died. I don't know.
Yeah. And I struggled with that. Obviously there was grace on me. I can remember what that gun barrel tastes like to this day, and the oil of it and the taste of it. And it's interesting. Just last week, I asked the Lord, why didn't I? Like, thinking about it, why didn't I? And I remembered this guy in the town I grew up in. His name, everyone called him Shorty. He was like 6'6". And Shorty walked around town all day and all night smoking cigarettes, looking up into the sky. Shorty shot himself in the head with a .22 caliber. Didn't kill him, obviously, but he was messed up. And the only gun I had was a .22 caliber.
Oh.
And I don't remember it until like when I was asking the Lord about it in the last week or so. Like that went through my mind. Like, oh, I'm going to be even that much more of a burden on my family, that I'm just going to be walking around smoking cigarettes, looking at the ceiling because I don't have a big enough gun.
Right.
Which is crazy.
Right. Totally.
But yeah, that was because, I had to call Mary and say, look, I got a DUI. I didn't tell her about the one in Montana. I only told her about the one in Wyoming.
Oh, you're being honest.
Because that's the one that Montana just let me go.
Wow.
I'm like, here's your court date. We'll see you in a month, whatever. So I couldn't deal with it. Like I just was like, okay, I got this. She's like, I knew it. I knew you could make it. So yeah, I was like, okay, this is over. I called some close friends who were like, yeah, you blew it. I'm tired of what are you doing? We believe in you, and then you go and do stupid things like this. So it was really the low. Yeah,
complete low. What ended up happening then?
I went back to Arizona and got a job in the oil field.
So they didn't throw you in prison?
Well, I hadn't gotten a court date yet.
Oh, okay, so you're going back. You're working in the oil fields in Arizona, and
in Pennsylvania. Mary ends up buying her own house.
Okay,
moving out.
Yeah,
I had some amazing people in my life helping me navigate that process of me going over and helping fix up her new house for her and my son to move into, and being okay with it. And we were separated, like I said, for a little over 3 years. And I kind of put my nose down and went to work and was in a lot of state mandated counseling and AA and group counseling, but still only dealing with Wyoming. So court took me like 4 months to finally get up there to go to court. And for the Wyoming one, they're like, I had to do 10 days in county jail.
Wow.
It's like, okay. But secrets, right?
Uh-huh.
Remember that, because I still haven't told Mary or anyone about the Montana DUI. So, meanwhile, I'm getting out of debt and getting my life together. I've been sober, right? Because drinking's not a thing. I got like 3 or 4 years of sobriety, but Mary's still like living her own life. We're not getting back together. It's so awkward to go to the same church. There's like 40 people. So I sit over there. She sits over there. Everybody knows that I'm the jerk. So it was awful. But I was just kind of like, I'm going to own this, right? Like,
Yeah.
I did it. I made these choices and I'm going to move on. And ultimately, I decided to move back to Idaho. And I'm like, Mary's either going to stay in Arizona or come with me, but I'm flying around for work a lot, and I'll fly to Arizona, grab my son, and drive to Idaho. Because I'd get like 15 days off in a row. And anyway, we started she needed to see me put some time in and be sober, and so she could trust me to the point of like, but ultimately miracles happened in our life, and she moved to Idaho with me. And the first night we slept in the same bed after all those years was the first night in our new house in Idaho.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which was 7 years ago this spring.
Okay. And what tell me about the secret, the secrets with Montana. What ends up, because it sounds like this thing comes back to bite you in the ass.
Yeah. We get back together. We moved to Idaho, new start, fresh start.
Which is amazing that she ended up back, and I'm sure there's tons of story that we don't have the time to go into.
Yeah. That's just miracle after miracle of what God did in her heart.
But through the process, did you just keep submitting your own self to okay, I'm in the process. I'm just going to keep plugging along here. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to let
because at one point she got an attorney and divorce papers.
Right.
And she said, we're going to get a divorce. I have the papers for you to sign when you get back.
Yeah. Wow.
And then I was outside when I first got to the house playing with our son in the grass. She looks out the window and is like, I can't. And God just gave her, wouldn't release. Her story is God just never would release her from me.
Right. She could feel something, because obviously she wasn't acting out of codependency, because she was willing to be like, no, I'm not going to go back into that shit.
No. And she had her own job. She wouldn't even, I was making stupid money in the oil field. She wouldn't even let me pay her mortgage. She wouldn't let me pay any of her bills. She was her own.
Yeah. And she was internally, she just couldn't get the peace to go hand the divorce papers over. She's like, no, I want to be. And obviously she wasn't being controlled, but she could feel like, oh, I'm pushing against, I'm violating something inside of myself if I pull the trigger on divorce.
Yeah. She just couldn't.
Yeah.
So we moved to Idaho. Immediately okay, we're getting older. We already have a son that's 5. We should probably start if we want more. So I believe we had our middle boy Grady, and she was pregnant with Bronson, and I'm like, I can't get a driver's license. I just can't, because every time I go in there, they're like, you need to call Montana. And I'm like, oh. And meanwhile, I'm driving for my company. And I started a company in the middle of all this, right? When we moved to Idaho.
You're driving all the time.
All over the country.
Yeah.
With no driver's license.
You must have been terrified.
I've almost had heart attacks, on the freeway, and highway patrolmen, drive past me and then kind of slow down and get in behind me. I'm like, well, this is it, because I have a bench warrant in Montana, and I'm driving from North Dakota to Idaho all the way through the length of Montana once a month.
Yeah.
So I can't get a driver's license. So I finally break down and I tell my best friend / business partner, I'm like, this is what happened.
Oh.
Secrets.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, whatever we need to do, brother. I'll run the company. I get an attorney. He's like, you're going to prison. He's like, you got 2 DUIs in 48 hours. They don't care how long ago it was. The states talk to each other now, right?
Yeah.
So he's like, you're going to get a year in prison. It'll be a felony. So all the fun things that come with being a felon, right?
Yeah.
Shame, guilt, can't have a gun, can't vote.
Yeah.
So I'm a wreck for years because of this, that secret, that bogging down
Destroying
of just
you.
the opposite of freedom. So it got to the point where I talked to the attorney, got a court date, and I'm like, I got to tell my pregnant wife, who has a 1.5-year-old and a 7-year-old, that I got to go to prison for a year. And we have property and we raise hay and have all these animals. And so I'm like, we need to go for a drive. So I get up the courage to, I didn't get up the courage. I had no choice. I had to tell her. So we go for a drive and I just start sobbing, blah, blah, blah. I finally tell her, like, I'm just honest. I'm like, this is what happened.
Yeah. How does she react?
She puts her hand on my knee and she says, we'll get through it.
Wow. Wow.
The opposite of all my fears.
Wow.
It's like that's the enemy does, right? He's like,
yeah.
Oh, I know how I can get you. And man, if I can get you thinking this badly, could you take another drink? Could life get so bad that, So I put on my brave face and we drove to Montana and go down there knowing that I'm going to jail for prison for a year.
Right.
Go to court. As we're walking in, the lawyer's like, wait a second, when did this happen? Like, he didn't listen to anything I told him before. He's like, oh, we can get out of it. You can fight this and get out of this. They would have to put the person who called you in, somebody called me in for swerving, they will have to pick you out of a lineup. And this is like 6 years old.
Oh, wow.
And they will have to pick you out of a lineup. It was dark. So he's like, you can fight this and totally win. And I walked around the corner and I said, Holy Spirit, I have ran my whole life.
Wow.
What do I do? I'm scared to death. And he told me, go face this. I got you. Don't be afraid. I go in, judge sits down. I'm the first person up. They're like, okay, the state of Montana versus Jeremy Morris, blah, blah, blah. First offense, DUI, how do you plead? I'm like, what? First offense, DUI, how do you plead? I said, guilty. She said, $500 fine, 24 hours in jail. Next.
Whoa.
Because it was so long, they never pulled my record.
Whoa.
Gets better. So they're like, the bailiff's like, when do you want to report to jail? I'm like, right now. Because my buddy's waiting for me, right?
Yeah.
So he goes and gets a room. I go in there. I'm not in there 10 minutes. And I'm like, this is why I'm here. There's 2 young men in here that need to hear my story. And they need to be introduced to the Redeemer. Because they have no hope.
Wow.
And I specifically, if I would have said, no, I want to fight it, I would have gotten off probably on a technicality.
Right.
But I wouldn't have been able to give these 2 guys hope.
And it would have drug stuff out even further.
It would have taken years.
And
the thing in my stomach, like,
yeah.
But yeah, it was amazing. The 24 hours I got to spend in there, 12 of it I spent with these 2 young men who were just hanging on every word that I had because they had nothing to cling to.
And I think I want to talk about that really quick because we don't have a ton of time left. But out of this, each moment of the darkest places and the blackest places, everything is starting to evolve into you owning, right? You just being like, this is my story. This is what happened. Not running anymore, facing the secrets and getting them out on the table. I have 2 questions. Well, one, did you really get to facing those secrets of your past with Mary, where you really got it all out on the table?
Still are.
You still are getting
to
it
this
out?
day.
Yeah. You're still dialoguing about it.
Well, I brought so much shame into the marriage, right?
Right.
I mean, my whole past is full of shame. And so there's just things that we've never talked about that now, I mean, on the way down here, we're talking about things. I'm like, I can't believe we're talking about this. I never thought we would talk about this.
Yeah.
So
what does it make you feel as you get those secrets out, as you have those conversations that felt
and those aren't
impossible?
even secrets. It's just the places of pain that
right.
I'm like,
dialoguing about it.
Wow, I can't believe we're having these conversations. I'm telling you, it is all the cliches, right? Like the truth will set you free.
Right.
And it's unbelievable of how it brings us closer together in our intimacy of like, wow, I really feel like she sees me and hears me in a different way now because I'm being honest. And you know what's crazy? All she ever wanted me to do was be honest with her, and I couldn't.
Yeah.
Because I was so ashamed of what I had done or what had happened to me, but there's this fine line, right, of like being a victim versus like, yeah, I've had some jacked up stuff happen in my past. What do you do with it? You either become a victim or you say, no, I'm going to own how I treat people and how I respond to things, but at the same time, going back and being like, oh yeah, that was painful.
I need to actually grieve. And so that's the two parts of your life where you've been in the process of, I'm going to actually grieve the reality of the destruction that happened to a little boy.
Yeah.
What happened to him through the relationships and everything. But I'm also going to own, like, this is now my life. And I cannot allow that past to drive me anymore. I have to own the destructive things that I do and the way that I've hurt people and all of that. Do you feel like that's...
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's very liberating to, and powerful to be like, oh no, this is where I made some bad choices and hurt people. But at the same time, like, have compassion for yourself, because you can go down either road. Like, I just feel so incredibly blessed to be here, because what happened to me, most people either end up incarcerated, right? Or dead.
Yeah.
Or so broken that they never recover from it.
Yeah.
And so it is powerful to be, but for both, I think, to be like, yeah, this happened, and being honest and telling your story. And I just would say to anyone, man, so a year ago, right after I met you, I've borrowed your bravery and told my story at a church. This is the part where I told my story, and a 70-year-old man came up to me afterwards, and he said, you know, some of those things that you were talking about that happened to you when you were a little boy, they happened to me too. And I've never told anybody about it till right now. And it makes me emotional, because that could have been me, but it also calls me to tell my story more and to encourage others, because what if he could have heard the story when he was 20 and not at the end of his life? And this guy has so much sadness in his eyes. Yeah. And it broke my heart for him. But also in the midst of that, I just feel amazed that I didn't wake up 70, 80 years old. Yeah. And alone and broken and shattered in so many places because I couldn't tell my story. Yeah. So I don't know the statistics, but my tier 1 group of friends, my close group of friends that I'm pretty honest and vulnerable with my story, 80% of them, of my men friends, have been molested. Wow. So I don't think that that's the thing that brought us together. Right. So it's staggering to me. I think there's a lot of men out there that some of these things have happened to, and they don't think that they can tell anybody. Yeah. Because the numbers, the statistics of it, I don't know what they are, like I said, but the percentage of just my friends, it blows my mind. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. It feels like culturally there's a different type of shame that men experience. For sure. As opposed to women. Now, there's immense shame in any type of sexual abuse, molestation, and it's immense with women. But there's like this concept of, oh, but that doesn't happen over here to men, and it means something about the man. It feels like it means something different to the masculinity, to the cultural masculinity, and our relationship with it. And it feels like there is how do I put it? It feels like the hiddenness on masculinity over this area is much more immense. For sure. The existence of hiddenness. And I'm not trying to minimize anything that I'm saying about femininity and their journey and their pain with it. I don't think that there's any difference in the pain. I just feel like the approach to it culturally is an entirely different monster. Yeah, I think women have done a much better job about talking about it. I think women are much braver about it. I think so too. And I don't hear the narrative of men talking about it, and I feel like it's an epidemic. And you look at the men that are numbing themselves from whatever device, it doesn't matter. A lot of it, I think, would probably trace back to some sort of abuse. Yeah. And they don't feel like they can talk about it. Yeah. And it's super powerful if you can.
I love your bravery in that. And I love that we're about shattering secrets in this. And, on the flip side, I've seen a restoration and a continual restoration of your marriage. It's in the process. It's continually evolving, and it's really beautiful. I've had the gifted opportunity to spend a little bit of time with Mary as well and participate in your world, obviously. There's part of your healing process that was provoked. I just want to get for just a couple minutes as we were about to wrap it up, but some of your healing journey, some of the equipping and the tools that happened in your journey. There's a really cool story to how you got, not that you'd already been on a healing journey, but you also got an infusion of some stuff. I want to get into some of that. So, but part of it plays a role. This goes all the way back to, interestingly enough, your Sunday school teacher. So currently these tools and stuff that you've been equipped with, here and now, years later, point all the way back to the Sunday school teacher. So let's talk about this, the stepmom that was a Sunday school teacher really quick. I know that really destroyed you, that situation. Tell me about a little bit of a reconnection with her and what happened there.
Yeah. So, again, Facebook, I get a private message about, 10, 11 years ago, maybe. Yeah. And this woman says, "Did you ever live in Montana?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And this is when Facebook's real new to me. And she's like, "Was your dad named Johnny?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "My name's Barbara, and your dad and I were married for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I just was wondering if this was you, and I wanted to see if you and your sister were doing well."
Mm.
And I didn't respond for a long time because I didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Because it brought back some memories, right?
Yeah.
And not necessarily even painful ones, but just like, whoa. Because at that point, I wasn't dealing with anything from my past, right? This is in the handle of vodka a day journey in my life. And I didn't even tell my dad about it. I just was like, I think I told Mary, I'm like, this is kind of weird. Like, I don't know. And then like a few months go by and I'm like, reach back out to her. I'm like, "Yeah, that is my dad. And I do remember you. And how are you?" And anyway, she just had this like grace and like genuine concern for my sister and I's well-being. And like, I felt super safe talking to her. So this goes on for, 9-10 years of just kind of light back and forth, Facebook, private message, like happy birthday, Merry Christmas. And then started probably, 5-6 years ago, getting a Christmas card with this generous gift certificate in it every year, for taking my family dinner. And then she started telling me a little bit of her journey and about her son. And, she's like, "My son has this, I wanted, can I jump back to how we met?
Yeah.
About the riddle?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you listen to the first episode, Justin left a little teaser, but the first time Justin and I met, I saw him at a conference. I didn't know he was going to be there. I knew who he was. And so I go up to him when he was by himself. And right before he was getting ready to go on stage, and I'm like, "Hey, do you like riddles?" And he's like, "What?" And I said, "Do you like riddles?" And I felt like you were kind of looking around me like, "Where's security? Because who's this weirdo?" And I said, "Your mom was my mom before she was your mom." And you're like, "What is this guy?" Now you're like dialing 911 on the phone. No. Then I think because she had told you about me as well. And I just remember you giving me this big hug and like, "I've always wanted a stepbrother." And we had all these little stepbrother quotes we threw at each other, but it was very special. Like, and I was so proud of myself because I'd worked on that since I saw you like 10 minutes before. I'm like, so anyway, that Sunday school teacher, from when I was a little kid turns out to be your mom.
Yeah.
And, it's just a beautiful of this painful part of my past that the Lord redeemed. And now,
what's wild is she introduced you to my podcast, didn't she?
So she did. When we were kind of just going back and forth and she was telling me parts of her story and journey, she's like, "You should check out my son's podcast." And so I started listening to the Liberation Project.
Yeah.
And going back and listening to old ones, and just like I was just getting into podcasts. Like I listened to like you and Bill Johnson, and that was it. You know what I mean? Like it was like early days. And so that's pretty high regard, right?
Yeah, I was like, "Hey, I got from there with old Billy, Billy J."
So I was going back and I listened to one, you referenced it, and I'm like, oh, I better go check that one out. And it was the one about you and your mom. When you had your mom on.
When I had my mom on, yeah.
And it wrecked me. And for the first time, I was like, I'm an open book about all my story, all of it. Like I can tell you, anybody, because I have healing in it. It's easy to be vulnerable when you have healing in something, right?
Right.
My story with my mom was the one last super painful, like, experience of my life of feeling rejected and all these horrible things I felt like happened on her watch, and she wasn't there to protect me, right? So I knew when I listened to that podcast that I had to, there was some reconciliation that had to happen. My mom has always felt bad, always wanted a relationship with me. But the part of it too was, if I ever told my mom what happened to me, I was convinced that she would hang herself.
Terrified that she would
felt bad enough.
End her life for what happened. Yeah. Especially given that it was a family member. The female was a family member, and there's a lot to it. And then everything else
Both
occurred.
Were, So on her side of the family. So I felt like I could never tell her our relationship. She was a good mom. She was a good nana to my boys. I was like, that's good enough for me. Yeah. Little did I know that I was going to meet you. That was turning into a dinner that turned into a 2-hour hangout in your office that night. Yeah. That literally changed me and my mom's relationship, and that of my daughters and that of my wife's. Yeah. In one night.
Yeah. Wow. That was over a year and a week ago.
Yep. So I just remember you telling me that I was not responsible for my mom's emotional well-being, and that I had a story that she needed to hear. And that's a long story, so I won't go all the way there, but I do want to give hope in this area. I learned this that day. I asked my mom if she could come talk to me. I wanted to tell her my story. And she's like, well, is it going to make me sad? Is it going to make me this? And I remember I remember borrowing your bravery, because this is the most scared. I didn't sleep the night before. I've never been so scared. Even with all the court stuff, I was so scared to tell my mom my story. But I remember you kind of coaching me up through it, and she was asking me all these questions when I was inviting her out. And I said, this isn't about you. This is my story. Yeah. And her realizing, like, uh-oh. But her saying yes to it. Wow. So she shows up the next day, 6 hours later, at the end of it. I'm holding my mom's face, who's been crying now for 3 or 4 hours. And I get to tell her that I forgive her. Wow. And I love her. Wow. The beautiful thing is, I realized that day that you can't forgive somebody for something they don't know about. Yeah. I could forgive her up to the level of her leaving and, all that and all the other things I've like forgiven her for. I could not forgive her for all the abuse, all the other things that I felt like happened on her watch until I told her. That's where the power is, but that's scary.
Oh, it's terrifying.
So for me, the beautiful thing is for me to get to hold her face and tell her we're crying, that I forgive her and I love her. The cool thing is it set us both free. Yeah. She got free from 46 years or 40 years of shame of leaving. Yeah. Me with my dad. And I literally was like, oh, I think I've hated women my whole life too.
Totally.
It changed my relationship with my daughter. Like the next 4 days later, I went and spent 3 hours with her and got to tell her my story and but not make excuses. Like, this isn't why I'm a shitty dad. Yeah. This is partly why it is, but it's no excuse. Yeah. But you need to know my story. Yeah. And so it was a beautiful thing that every time I go have lunch with my mom, I send you a picture of me and her together, because that gift you gave me that day, that night, changed our story forever. And my mom, who's the most incredibly loving person, who just wanted a relationship with her son and didn't know what the barrier was. And I felt like I could not ever tell her because I thought it would kill her. It's what set us both free.
Yeah. Come on.
It changed everything.
Shattering Secrets.
Yeah.
And that's, do you have anything more to say? Otherwise, I'm going to kind of wrap this up now. I challenged you in the last episode, everyone out there, like, hey, maybe there's secrets you need to share. And Jeremy's life was riddled
oh my gosh,
with secrets.
One after another.
No pun intended with you saying riddle. But the riddle is that he's been riddled with secrets. And shattering those secrets progressively as he's chosen to be brave. And even you talked about the idea of, I borrowed your bravery.
Yeah, I didn't have it for myself. And I remember that day that my mom was coming out, my wife coming in and praying for me in the room, and our time together of like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And I just was like thinking about our conversations. You called me every day up to that day. And like, I told my wife, I'm like, I'm just going to have to borrow Justin's bravery to get through this, because there's no way I can have this conversation.
And some of you listening may need to borrow Jeremy's bravery. Like, all you can do is go, okay, I'm not alone. I know that he could do it. I'm just going to jump at this. I don't know how to muster it up inside of me, but I'm going to lean on his journey, his story, and I'm going to lean into this in this process. The truth is like, Jeremy didn't know how his mom was going to respond. His mom could have gotten angry, aggressive, shut down, pulled away, and she, had emotions, but that's okay. His job wasn't to manage her, and his goal wasn't actually to get a certain response out of her. His goal was to have a voice. His goal was to get out of his secrets. His goal was to be able to get free enough that he could forgive, that he could let things go, not just hide, not just run anymore. And this 2-part series is about breaking hiddenness. It's about finding freedom through finding your voice. It's about facing your scariest past, the things you don't want to talk about, the things you don't want to look at. And it's about them no longer controlling your life and driving your circumstances. So much of Jeremy's furthered pain that kept getting furthered in his life was driven by the unprocessed pain that he didn't want to look at. He didn't want to get honest with. He didn't want to share it with people around him. And all it did was accumulate more. But in the end, what it became, like Jeremy said, the old saying, the truth shall set you free. When we get in partnership with truth, it will bring freedom in one way or another. It may be ugly, it may be messy, it may not be the way that we like it to go, but it will perpetually spark and create freedom in our lives. And so what's really beautiful is that there's a continual progression of joy and happiness and peace, because these things aren't weighing you down the way that they were anymore. And it's not only freedom, produces even more freedom. So now it's not just Jeremy gets freedom. It's that, we've got an estimated almost 200,000 listeners that listen to this, and your freedom and your bravery is now a gift for them to get freedom, and it multiplies. It heals hearts. And so there's an invitation to all of you out there listening to release freedom, to get your freedom, to know that it's going to produce more freedom, that it's not just for you, but if it was only for you, that's more than enough. But it's not going to be just for you. It's going to go out and it's going to echo through the sands of time. And the other thing I want to say is it's beautiful, because in our lives, in our greatest tragedies, our greatest losses, there is love and life and healing interwoven throughout our story that we're not even aware of how it's woven. Like, Jeremy didn't know that he was going to get the woman who was disappeared out of his life, that Sunday school teacher, was one day going to reach out to him again and be part of provoking a healing process, and even introduce him to her son that she now had, who had a podcast about transformation and had stories that he could share. And I've been able to partner with Jeremy and lend pieces of my strength to him, and all hidden and interwoven in these stories. And I think that that's also the beauty of even inviting God and the divine into our story and being like, all right, I'm just going to let you in. I'm going to, like, whoever you are, whatever you want to do, because it opens up as we submit our will and we say yes to it. All these happenstances that are really beautiful begin to transform our lives. And with that said, I have been so immensely grateful for our friendship and for the journey of connecting and the vulnerability that you've shared with me and getting to exchange my heart with you. And I know from the very get-go when I met you, it was like instantly I felt like I'd known you forever, and that like there was that bond that we had in that. And it's been a beautiful relationship to watch continually evolve. And I'm just so thankful for it. And I'm thankful for you coming in, willing to share bravely your story again on on this platform for people to get their healing. So, all that to say, to wrap it up, I don't know if you have anything else, but I'm going to finish it now. If you guys haven't, Jeremy talked about compassion and the power of compassion, having compassion on yourselves. And we have a teaching series that you can get a hold of called The Compassion Project. And you can go to stumblconsulting.com/courses/The Compassion Project. And that multiple part series, you can download, you can watch it watch it online, or you can download it as well, the audio, take it with you, and you can go check that out, because there's something about our relationship to compassion, that compassion is a healing component, not just compassion here and now, but compassion for ourselves and our history, and getting love and compassion to those places, and how we do that.
And trusting it.
And trusting it, yeah. So if you got anything out of this, touched by it, remember to rate, review, subscribe, and share. Get it out there. Send it to people that you love, that you care about. Let them know about it so that they can get out of their secrets, they can get their freedom, and they can see the miracles unfold in their own lives. So thanks again for joining me, Jeremy. I appreciate it.
Love you so much. Thank you for everything.
You bet. I love you too, my man. And all of you out there, I love you. Have a good day. Goodbye now.